So, you think you're untouchable?
Word life. This is basic thugonomics. This is basic thugonomics. Word life. I'm untouchable, but I'm forcing you to feel me. Word life. This is basic thugonomics. Word.
Good evening, Who Dat Nation, and happy Wednesday to our Bayou Blitz family. I hope everybody is doing well out there. I know those of us in the media, the word exhausted doesn't even begin to cover it since free agent frenzy began on Monday. Today is the official official day one of the NFL new year. So all these signings that y'all were hearing about since Monday and frankly over the weekend, during the quote unquote tampering period, a term made up by Roger Goodell, corrupt Nazi MF for Roger Goodell. All those signings are becoming official today, and here to break them all down is your Bayou Blitz podcast co-host, myself, Bob Rose, and over on the better side of the screen, Brendan.
I'm doing good. Hope you are. Wednesday on a Wednesday, so that's a plus, right? We're actually doing our show when we tell people we're going to do our show. So that's a win for exhausted you and exhausted me. Exhausted for different reasons. But look, you're right. I put reacting to week one of free agency because it has felt like an entire week when in all actuality, if you want to get to the technicalities of it, today is the first day of it.
Yeah.
But you've had rumblings, reporting, and probably even longer than a week now. For some of these guys that released with the post, new league year, that type of thing. Like Aaron Rodgers, for example, doesn't get officially released until after 4:00 today, and those type of things. But before we jump into what the Saints have done and kind of speculate on what the Saints are going to do, just a few minutes before we went on the air, we do have some news, and it shouldn't come as a surprise to anybody. There was some rumblings and maybe speculation, more so done by the fans than anybody, on if maybe he would hang him up. But Cameron Jordan posting on his Instagram today that he will officially be coming back for his 15th season. Bob, this is an interesting one because kind of like what we were talking about before we went live, there was a handful of people that were speculating, maybe even hoping that Cameron Jordan would retire. But with a new head coach and a new system and some of the moves the Saints have made, Cameron Jordan may fit into this puzzle very well as a veteran guy, a guy who's going to be in on your NASCAR packages, as I like to call them, when you bring in a lot of different pass rushers to try to get to the quarterback. And you're not going to see as many snaps for Cameron Jordan as years past. Your initial reaction to Cameron Jordan announcing he will be back for his 15th year, and what I think a lot of us should assume is kind of the farewell tour.
Yeah, Brendan, it feels like a farewell tour, which saddens me a little bit. I'm thrilled Cam Jordan is back because I love Cam Jordan. I love his sound bites. I love his access to the media. He will give you something every time you talk to him, and anybody who covers the New Orleans Saints knows this for a fact. And on the field, he could still play, and we saw that last year. I know that there have been people that wanted Cam Jordan gone for the last 2 or 3 years. Oh, his production's no longer there, and we said it prior to training camp last year that we both felt Cam still had plenty left to give. You just had to limit his snaps. And that's what the Saints did last year, or at least attempted to do. And Cam had a real strong stretch about 2/3, between the halfway point and 2/3 mark of the season. It only finished with four or five sacks, but a bunch of quarterback pressures. Like I said, he could still play. He could still offer this defense something. He's not an every down player anymore, and that's okay, because he can mentor some of the young guys that we hope that the Saints bring in, via draft, possibly get into Chase Young's ear, and hopefully continue the development of that young man. And we'll get more into Chase Young in a minute. So I'm happy. Cam. I wish the Saints could have gotten Cam a Super Bowl ring, because there's very few people in franchise history that deserve one more than Cam Jordan. You'd have to go back. You would lump Cam Jordan right in there with Pat Sweat. Really, Ricky Jackson got one when he turned traitor and went to the 49ers. So I don't count him. But Sam Mills, Sammy Knight, Pat Swilling, Dalton Hilliard, some of those guys who, if you followed their career, you just said, wow, I would have loved if this guy could have gotten a ring. Cam is very much in that conversation, but I'm at least glad we get to see him go out on his terms. And I'm telling you, folks, he still has some football left.
Absolutely right. I think more than anything, there was a little bit of me that thought that he may not end his career with the Saints, and that not being the Debbie Downer of it all, if you will, but it being one of those situations where the Saints want to move on, but they want to do right by Cam. Like, I could have seen a situation like that. So I am glad that, at least on paper, and at least by the looks of it right now, that Cameron Jordan's going to be able to end his career. A lifer, I think that's the term a lot of the kids are using now, but be a Saints lifer. And that warms my heart. I think you hit the nail on the head with guys that you would have loved to see win a championship, because, I mean, look, anything can happen, but if we're all being honest with ourselves, the Saints are not going to be competing for a championship this upcoming year. So, yeah, the window may be open like that much, like just a wee bit, but in all actuality, it's more than likely not going to happen. So that stinks. But I do want to point out the one thing that I saw in that list that you started coming up with. The one thing with that list of guys that were not Super Bowl winners, that were longtime Saints, all of those dudes, you think that way, one, because they played for a long time, they represented the city well, they represented the franchise well, all those things. But they all were guys that gave their all every single down. And I think that goes a long way to, yes, it's unfortunate for Cameron Jordan the way the last few years have gone, not just for the team, but for him as well, right? You and I would be the first people to say Cameron Jordan has lost a step. Father Time is undefeated. And we're starting to see that kind of trickle in to Cameron Jordan. It doesn't mean he's done. Like Bob said, I still think he's got a lot of valuable football left. But you have to redefine the role a little bit and to maximize what is left. It's been unfortunate, like I said, for Cam. It's been unfortunate for the Saints how that championship window has closed. But one thing we can always appreciate, and I will always appreciate, is there was no doubt in your mind you were getting 120, 130, 150% from Cameron Jordan week in and week out. And it's a really, really easy guy to root for already. He's got such an infectious personality, but you throw in the fact that he is the hardest working individual in that building every single day, even easier to root for in a situation like that. So I think we're both in agreement. Very happy to see Cameron Jordan come back for year 15. Let's talk.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, let's go ahead and talk about other moves that have happened. I don't know, do you call Cameron Jordan coming back for 15? Is that a move? Like, it's not a transaction. He's still under contract, so it's not really a move, right?
Right, and it wasn't a restructure. For the quick list of restructures, ladies and gentlemen, Eric
That's not a quick
McCoy.
list. That is a very long
Uh,
list.
Eric McCoy, Derek Carr, which we covered in our special show on Sunday, Demario Davis, Carl Granderson, Kalen Saunders, Cesar Ruiz, uh, Pete Werner, Tyron Matthew had his deal reworked, which basically means he's the only one of those guys that took a slight pay cut. And Nathan Shepard was extended for a year. So yeah, that's like you said, it's not a short list, but I read through it as fast as I could.
I was gonna say it's a novel every offseason. I was also gonna say if it wasn't for the Cameron Jordan little news, I was going to open up this podcast by saying, "Hello, guys. Welcome to another edition of We Survived Cap Hell,"
Mm-hmm.
because they worked their way out of it yet again. And the only thing I can think of is the rest of the NFL and the rest of NFL Twitter logging into their accounts and posting the GIF or posting the portion of the scene from Breaking Bad where Jesse Pinkman yells out, "He can't keep getting away with this." That's how I think a lot of the rest of the NFL and NFL Twitter reacts to the Saints being what, $80 million over the cap or dang near close to it. And still working their way.
Mm-hmm.
Cameron on Twitter says, "So I'm late, but Cam is staying." Yes, Cameron Jordan is coming back for year 15. So let's get into the other guys that we will call the Saints retained. Either rework deals, you kind of already alluded to Tyron Matthew taking less money, and you read off that beautiful list of restructures. But there are some guys that do have new contracts.
Mm-hmm.
Two of which, and I think these are the two we should start with in no particular order. But the two that grabbed a lot of the headlines were Chase Young coming back on a multi-year deal, and also Juwan Johnson coming back on a multi-year deal. So, Bob, I pass the baton to you. Where would you like to start? Offense with Juwan Johnson or defense with Chase Young?
I'll tell you what, they both created similar controversy, controversial waves. But let's start with the slightly more recent of the two. Juwan Johnson, the 28-year-old tight end, re-signed for 3 years and a little bit shy of $30 million. That's maximum. $30 million. That's if he hits a handful of incentive clauses that were built into his deal. A lot of people are losing their minds about that for a couple reasons. One, you have the crowd, and I include myself in this. This wanted the Saints to either go out and sign in free agency, a difference-making tight end, and not this year, but the previous 2 years, there were a bunch available at affordable prices, and the Saints just didn't even look at them. Or the people, and myself included in this group, that wanted the Saints to draft someone, basically since Jimmy Graham left town. Someone in the way of a TJ Hawkinson or a Sam Laporta or a Dallas Goedert, all guys that I called for strongly, in recent years. Well, I mean, Juwan Johnson is neither one of those, but he's back. And there's a lot of people that are angry. All they're looking at is the $30 million contract. Folks, that's not the way you need to look at these NFL deals. The more accurate way to look at Juwan Johnson is, he's only going to cost a little less than $6 million against the salary cap this particular season. And they locked down a matchup problem at the position. He's more athletic than pretty much any linebacker that would try to cover him, and he's bigger than a lot of the cornerbacks that would try to cover him if he goes out into the slot or out wide. Does Juwan need to get more consistent? 100%. Absolutely, he does. But, I mean, he has the route tree of a wideout, which, of course, he used to be. And, Kellen Moore has maximized the tight end position everywhere he has been. And in Dallas and with the Chargers, he didn't have someone the caliber of Juwan Johnson. I'm talking athleticism and upside. The best tight end Kellen Moore has worked with is Dallas Goedert. athletically, I think Johnson is on that par. So I feel pretty strongly that Kellen Moore is going to be able to do something unique with Juwan Johnson and hopefully maximize the abilities we've seen him tease us with over the last couple years. So again, don't look at the $30 million. Look at it as they have a guy that Kellen Moore is going to maximize. They locked him up. And it's not going to cost them a great deal against the cap this year, and it gives them a restructure opportunity with a guy on the younger side of 30 years old over the next over the next 2 seasons, should they need to.
This is going to be different. I get to play the other side of the coin. Bob being the positive one with Juwan Johnson, I get to play the negative side. If you've watched the show over the last few years, or read either of our work in the time Juwan Johnson's been in New Orleans, we both really like what Juwan Johnson brings. I think the word that you brought up that is super key for a guy like Juwan is consistency. And over the last 2 years, maybe even 3 years, you could say that this was a stretch for Juwan to really prove that he could be a top 15 receiving tight end in the NFL. And you like to call them name in the hat guys at quarterback. Take that same philosophy for tight ends, and I think Juwan Johnson is somewhere in that name in a hat. Like, this guy could be a matchup problem. He could drop it 100-yard receiving game and a touchdown, or he could drop a touchdown and only record 30 yards. It's just kind of where we were. I think the reason fans reacted the way that they did is because Juwan has been given more opportunity the last few years. He hasn't capitalized on it the way that a lot of people hoped. But I also think a lot of people view it the same way that I do, is I think we've seen what Juwan Johnson is, right? When you start hitting that 28, 29, 30 years old threshold in your NFL career, you're not a young buck anymore. Mm-hmm. It is, let's bank on the potential. Let's re-sign this guy because of the potential that he brings. That was the last contract for Juwan. Now you kind of know what he is, about 50 receptions, 500 yards, could be a better mismatch in the red zone, especially in Kellen Moore's offense, and he did a great job highlighting the success that Moore has had with his tight ends in his career. But I think that's what Juwan is, like I said, 50 receptions, 500 to 700 yards, like 700 yards being like the top end of a season for him, and a handful of touchdowns. And I think that's why people looked at the contract, looked at the numbers, and said, wait, why are we paying him $10 million a year? My favorite one, though, with all of it, because Saints Twitter is a fun place. It's quirky, but it's a fun. There were people posting screenshots of the articles when Jimmy Graham signed his extension at 4 years, $40 million. And like, we're paying Jimmy Graham $10 million a year. Guys, inflation's a real thing. All right, if you guys haven't, it's a real thing since Jimmy Graham signed his extension like 10 years ago.
Wow.
But it was my favorite thing that I saw the entire period since Juwan had resigned. But I was sitting there like, this is a completely different NFL with a completely different salary cap. Do I think it's good value in today's NFL? Yes. Mm-hmm. Because guess what? Even if you're not a huge fan of Juwan, even if you're kind of in the same boat as me and you think we've kind of seen what the max potential is for Juwan Johnson, somebody else would have paid him that money. I guarantee
or more.
Someone else in the league would have paid him that amount of money strictly because of what Bob said. This is a guy who played receiver in college, is one of the more athletic receiving tight ends. Maybe not a great blocker, but he's going to be a mismatch in the red zone on third down, this and that. Somebody would have taken the opportunity to bring him in. I think it's a good deal for the Saints. I think the key to this contract is what Bob pointed out, is you have an opportunity to restructure. Because what? Because they do it all the time. They restructure these contracts. They build in these things that convert to signing bonuses all the time. So if this doesn't work out after year 2, and you're sitting in year 3 and you're going, there's a way to get out of the contract if you don't want to be in it anymore. But I really thought it was a good deal. I also think it's good because, let's face it, new head coach, there's not a lot of things on offense where you found a lot of consistency. A lot of that has to do with the injuries. But I can see Juwan Johnson not being a cornerstone piece for the offense as it continues to become more, but being a key role and being a guy that is just there and has the opportunity to build himself into being more of a consistent, reliable target. I think that's super important as you try to install different things within a new offense. So personally, I like the signing or re-signing.
Now, why don't you kick us off on the Chase Young wave of controversy? Because I'm curious where you sit. With that one.
Yeah, I was surprised, and to be frank, I think there's a lot of us in the media that, going off of last season, I didn't know what type of market Chase was going to have, right? And a lot of that is because if you're looking at the numbers and the numbers alone, they don't jump off the page. He didn't have a whole lot of sacks. But the almost sacks jumped off the page. The pressures jumped off the page. But we live in a world where there's a ton of guys sitting at their laptops and they're pushing their glasses up like this and going, well, the analytics say that. And that's the type of world we live in. So I didn't know what type of market he was going to attract. I was also surprised to see it was a 3-year deal to come back. If he had went somewhere else, it wouldn't have surprised me. That's something like 3 years. I was a little surprised. I was truly expecting the Saints to be like 2-year contract and that's it. And I know that sounds silly and that sounds odd, and that's definitely not a favorable deal for the player, but that's exactly where I expected the Saints to come in. And maybe that's where the negotiations started is, hey, we're going to give you 2 years to prove that you can be the guy that was drafted number 2 overall however many years ago now. The money doesn't bother me because of the market that was just set a few days before that deal was signed. And I think that is very key and very crucial to remember. Because, Chase Young could have been sitting with his representatives and looking at a completely different number and going, this is kind of where we want to be at. And then all of a sudden, everybody's phone's blowing up. And, Garrett gets, $120 million. And every edge rusher in the world is like, woohoo! They give out a little like Super Mario at the end of the world, and that's why for Chase Young and then other defensive ends that are and edge rushers that will get contracts, those numbers are probably going to look higher than you expected. I think that's a really key thing to remember. That's why the money doesn't bother me. The years concern me, because if we get a second year of the what was the word that we used? What were we calling him at the end of the year? Like the anti-finisher, essentially, like couldn't finish the play. If we get another year of that, that contract's going to look really bad. However, if you get a guy who is somewhere around 10 sacks, is showing you that production, getting the pressures on the quarterback, and then it looks to be a good contract. I also think he fits the 3-4 a lot better. And I think that's another reason he got the years and he got the money. I don't understand why so many people are upset about it. It is a swing. Like, this isn't a sure thing. Like, this isn't something where, it's a fastball down the middle and all you got to do is make contact and that thing's sailing 400 feet in the center field, right? Like, it's a breaking ball. You got to make contact and you got to swing hard. But I'll give the Saints credit for doing it because of everything we just talked about with Cameron Jordan at the top.
Yeah.
Right? You need a guy to step up. Granderson didn't step up on that new contract either. And then obviously Peyton Turner no longer a Saint as well, as they lost him to Dallas. But did the Saints really lose him to Dallas, or did they lose him to injuries all those years ago? That's another debate.
They never had him, so.
They had him for the one blocked field goal against Atlanta.
Uh-huh.
Peyton Turner has that in Saints lore for the rest of his life. Is he blocked what would have been a game winner. So way to go, Peyton Turner. But that's why I'm not mad at it. I don't understand why so many people are mad about it.
I think so many people are mad at it because the people that are mad at it are the same people that are mad that Juwan Johnson was re-signed. They want all the existing players out of here, and they want new names. Some of them don't even care what names. They just want new names. Or they believe that because the Saints are more focused on re-signing their own in-house guys, that they aren't doing anything in free agency. And we've covered that, year after year after year. You and I have known each other, where at this point in free agency, a couple days in, people are saying, well, the Saints have only signed one player. We'll get into him in a minute. No, the Saints have signed, if you count the in-house guys, the Saints have addressed safety. The Saints have addressed edge rusher. The Saints have addressed tight end. The Saints have addressed interior defensive line. All those were off-season, they still are, in my opinion, but all those were clear off-season needs coming into once the regular season was over. So that's why I think that there's a lot of hate for Chase Young, the signing itself. I'm middle of the road on it. And I know that sounds like a cop-out. I understand the signing because what's the one thing that you and I professed concern about as soon as Brandon Staley was, as soon as it was clear Brandon Staley was going to be the defensive coordinator? All right, Staley's going to come in. He's going to run a 3-4. Do they have the pieces for the 3-4? The answer was a resounding no. Well, Chase Young, and I agree with you, Brendan, even though Chase Young has played in a 4-3 throughout his entire NFL career, most observers, myself included, believe that he would be perhaps even a better fit as a stand-up rusher in a 3-4 base, which is more than likely what he's going to be more often than not. That's where you get his hand out of the dirt. You put his athleticism out wide, to set him up for counter moves or just use his speed around the end, outside shoulder of a tackle. I think Chase Young can create some disruption that way. But the reason why I'm middle of the road on it is, what did I say about Chase last year? When we addressed the criticisms of, oh, he's a draft bust, he doesn't give enough effort. I went back and I watched the film, and I said this at mid-season last year when the topic came up. So I'm basically reiterating myself from them. I came to the conclusion that Chase Young is not one of those players that give effort on every other play. The effort is there, and you pointed that out with the quarterback pressures and the QB hits, but he's not getting the sacks. The reason he's not getting the sacks is because, folks, Chase Young is not a finisher. He is not. I'm reaching back quite a few years, but he's not a Lawrence Taylor or a Reggie White or a Pat Swilling or Ricky Jackson. He's not a Myles Garrett or a JJ, either Watt brother, TJ or JJ, Khalil Mack in his prime, Von Miller in his prime. He's not that guy. He's not the guy that keeps offensive game coordinators up all night trying to find ways just to contain him, knowing that they're not going to be able to stop him. It's okay to not be that guy. But when you're the second overall pick in the NFL draft, you're supposed to be that guy. That's why Chase Young gets the criticism. The Saints know that Chase Young is not that guy. That's why, for an edge rusher that's in his physical peak, the contract itself is pretty modest. Again, folks, don't look at the 51 million up to 57 million with incentives. Don't look at the total number. Look at what the cap hit is. And this year, it's a very, very team-friendly deal with, again, just like Juwan Johnson's deal, an opportunity to restructure or an opportunity to move out from the contract if Chase Young regresses. It's a possibility he could get better. I still believe edge rusher is a need for this team, a difference maker. I still believe that the Saints could and should address it early in the draft. If not in the first round, then certainly on day 2. And if you get a difference maker on the other side of that defense, all of a sudden Chase Young is facing a lot more one-on-one blocking, than he would and then he does, as the featured guy. We don't know what Carl Granderson's fit is going to be in this defense. I've written an article asking that very question. I think they're going to move Granderson around a little bit till they find a fit. Same with Brian Bresee. Chase Young or Cam Jordan, as we talked about in the beginning, a role player at this point in his career, and certainly not a stand-up rusher. So Chase Young is the only pure stand-up edge rusher you have right now. That's why they did the deal. And if you look around, Bosa, Joey Bosa, and I can't understand why Saints fans wanted him, because you're crying about Peyton Turner being injured all the time, Marcus Davenport being injured all the time. Bosa's on the injury list nearly 50% of the time. He's damn good when he's not, but you can't count on him not being there. But the deal that Bosa got is for 1 year, but about $10 or $12 million. Break down the average of Chase Young's contract. What's Khalil Mack getting? Same kind of thing. Once you get outside of the Myles Garretts and the TJ Watt deals and the deal that Micah Parsons is going to get, Chase Young is nowhere near that level, but Chase Young is not getting paid to be at that level. So when I look at it from that perspective, I felt like the Saints had to sign him. You and I debated about, in the weeks leading up to free agency, the two biggest names, in-house free agents that the Saints had were Paulson Adebo and Chase Young. And who would I rather re-sign? And I said Paulson Adebo, and I listed the reasons why at the time. It didn't turn out to be that way. The Saints instead valued Chase Young a little bit higher. Not the move I would have made personally, but I completely understand the reasoning behind it.
Yeah, I do too. And I think a lot of it is two things. We talked about system fit with Chase Young, but also drafting Kool-Aid McKinstry where they did last year.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you felt like you had a little bit more room to lose a defensive back coming off of a leg injury than you did what you would just describe as your only really true fit at pass rusher in this new defensive team. But Paulson Debo hurts. I want to save some of the departures for a little bit later.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go ahead and talk about the one trade, right? There was a trade. It brought a Louisiana kid home, and it was a good system fit. So, Bob, the details.
Well, the New Orleans Saints, on, I believe it was Monday morning, their first official move, traded a 7th-round pick in 2026, so next year, a 7th-round pick in next year's draft to the New England Patriots for Devon Godshaw, a nose tackle who's been with New England the last couple of years. Is Godshaw a perennial Pro Bowler? No. Is he even a star, a defensive line feature? No. But we just got done talking about the different pieces needed for Brandon Staley to run his 3-4 scheme. There's not a pure nose tackle on this roster. Well, there wasn't before. Godshaw is that guy. It gives you some system versatility with Bresee, who you don't want to plug in the middle anyway. Gives you a little bit of versatility with a Nathan Shepard and a Colin Saunders, who are big-bodied guys, but not prototype nose tackles. Godshaw is the type of guy, he's not going to show up big on the stat sheet. He doesn't create a whole lot of disruption as a pass rusher. But what he does, he plugs those gaps, as a run defender, something that this defense hasn't had in almost 3 years. What he does, he ties up blockers, as a pass rusher, giving some one-on-one opportunities to a Carl Granderson, a Cam Jordan, a Brian Bresee, a Chase Young. Godshaw isn't going to do a lot except just take up space and hopefully, if he does his job well, hopefully push that pass pocket and push that run blocker, those run blockers back a little bit into the backfield. That's what causes this, right? It doesn't show up on the Sports Center highlights or the fantasy football team highlights or the almighty PFF rankings at the end of the day. But what it does, it creates opportunities for your other defensive players. So I like the move. It's a very low risk, high reward because you're giving up basically nothing. I know the long and lengthy list of late day 3 picks who have made it big in the NFL, not just throughout the league, but for the Saints in particular. But that's a rarity. With Godshaw, at least you have a guy who's played a couple years in this league, did so with relative success. And again, if you're looking for a pieces to fit your new defensive system, he's the guy that will do it.
It's always nice to see a Louisiana kid come back and get the opportunity to play in New Orleans. Like Bob said, I mean, not to piggyback too much, but very plain and simple, it's a system thing. This isn't a guy that's going to be an earth-shattering acquisition, but he's a guy that is going to fit this new system well. And that's a need. Like Bob said, there's not a true nose tackle until now on the roster. We have one signing to get to.
Mm-hmm.
That wasn't a restructure, wasn't a re-signing, and wasn't a trade. So we've worked all the way around, and we have one signing. And to be honest, this one didn't just surprise me; it surprised a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny how things work sometimes when you get news of a player departing. Because I saw the news of Will Harris signing a 2-year, $10 million deal.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, well, oh my God, the Saints don't have a safety. Like the Saints have no safeties. And it wasn't but just a little bit later that we get the news that the New Orleans Saints continue to become the New Orleans Chiefs.
Mm-hmm.
And that is with the signing of Justin Evans. So, Bob, why New Orleans for a guy like Evans, who I thought was going to have a pretty good market in free agency and arguably the best safety available?
He was right up there. Justin Reed, again, still on the young side of 30. So they're not signing an over-the-hill guy like they have with their last couple safety signings. They're not signing an injury-prone guy. Reed has been very durable. Knock on wood. Always knock on wood when you say that about a New Orleans Saint. Reed isn't the kind of guy. Well, like you said, Reed had interest throughout the league. There were reported offers from other teams. He chose New Orleans, and actually, you're talking about another Louisiana native, coming home, for lack of a better term. You got younger and slightly more athletic at the position. And whether we both wanted Will Harris back, and it hurts to lose him. You're not talking about a star or a defensive centerpiece in Will Harris, but you were talking about a capable starter at a position that we both highlighted as a major need, with or without Will Harris on the roster. Well, just like with Chase Young, the signing of Justin Reed diminishes that need a little bit. I still think it's there. Because you have to get a replacement for Tyrann Mathieu like yesterday, a guy that can tackle, a guy that's willing to tackle. But at least you have that in. I see the grin. At least you have that in Justin Reed. Justin isn't the kind of guy that you want covering the slot very much, but he is a kind of guy that you can bring down in the box, to play the run. He's a capable deep safety. I don't love his range as a single high safety, but when you put him back there with Tyrann Mathieu, remember these guys had played together for a year, not with the Chiefs, But way back that one single season that Tyrann Mathieu was with the Houston Texans, that was Justin Reid's first or second year in the NFL. So, I mean, these guys have a little bit of experience playing with each other, which is important at safety. Make no mistake about that. Is the communication, and the ability to be familiar with each other eliminates a whole lot of blown assignments. So I think that's an underrated aspect of this signing. And you do have two guys who play with good instincts and bait quarterbacks very, very well. In a too high system. And again, even though you don't want Reid in man-to-man coverage or covering that slot, he does give you a little bit of system versatility in the way that, in a worst case scenario, you can put him back at a single high safety. He does very well in a two high system, and he could play down in the box for you as well.
I'm glad you mentioned that that Reid and Mathieu had played that 1 year together. It was Reid's rookie year in Houston. I also think it's fun and important to mention that Reid was Mathieu's replacement for the Chiefs when Mathieu signed in New Orleans. So there is some familiarity there, like you mentioned as well, another Louisiana kid coming home. I think this is an important one. And like you said, it diminishes it a little bit, but there is still a strong need, not just for, like you said, a realistic replacement over the next year or so for Tyrann Mathieu, but just depth at the safety position as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
Howden didn't make that jump that a lot of us were hoping last year.
He regressed, man. He was bad.
So there was at one point that little hope that you found a little gem in day 3. I don't know how much more hope there is holding on to that, but that is a position of need, depth need. For sure. Last few minutes, let's talk about some of the guys that have now left. We brought up Will Harris. We brought up Paulson Adebo. I do want to focus a little bit on Paulson Adebo because for a lot of us, that was the one that I think a lot of us held hope that he'd be back, but understood had the realization that it probably wasn't going to happen. Where do you sit on that? Do you think it's going to be one of those moves that ends up biting the Saints in the butt in a few years?
I don't know if it'll bite him in the butt. And I like Paulson Adebo a lot. He got a lot of penalties, but guys, that's what you get in today's NFL. And B, when you have a physical man-to-man style of cornerback. Marshawn Lattimore got his fair share of penalties too, and I didn't see a whole lot of criticism of Lattimore about that or over that. Adebo is a number one corner for a lot of teams. He'll be the number one corner for the Giants. I wanted to keep him because without him now, in my view, cornerback is a definite need. Kool-Aid McKinstry is a player, and I think he's going to be a good one. I like Alontae Taylor a lot. But who else do you have here? Rico Payton. He was a revelation last year, but he's not a number 3 corner. Maybe that opens the door to them drafting the Michigan cornerback Will Harris with the 9th overall pick. I wouldn't be mad at that. Maybe they're going to pursue Asante Samuel in free agency. I certainly hope so. It'd be a nice fit in Brendan Staley's system. Brendan Staley drafted Asante Samuel when he was head coach of the Chargers. But I think you have to bring in a cornerback, a starting caliber cornerback via, whether it's via free agency or the draft, because you just don't have enough cornerbacks on this depth chart now. I know signing Justin Reid somewhat fortifies the safety position, but again, he's not a guy that you can move down. He's not what Von Bell was when Von was here. Not a guy that can play cornerback in a pinch, or cornerback in multiple receiver formations. Justin Reid is not that guy. Tyrann Mathieu is no longer that guy. So I mean, you have a definite void here that I think that they have to fill again with a starting caliber cornerback. I understand prioritizing Chase Young over Paulson Adebo, like we said a couple segments ago, but Paulson hurts. You're losing Paulson Hurts. I don't think it's the type of move that'll send your team spiraling to the bottom of the NFL. But it now creates a need on a team that already had a bunch of needs on both sides of the football.
I think that's the one thing that a lot of Saints fans every offseason don't realize. This isn't a team, and especially now, because the team's not good. But this has not been a situation over the last few years, especially, where it's like, oh, the Saints are like one or two moves away from having like a good depth chart. I think it's safe to say for the last 3 or 4 years, you and I can come onto this show and point out more than two positions, at least two positions, that where it's just like, this is bad, right? Like there are good teams where it's like, okay, like we have some concerns here at this position, but this is how we can overcome it. Or like Bob alluded to, maybe you have a guy who can play a multitude of positions for you. The Saints were really good about utilizing their safeties to do that over the years, right? Malcolm Jenkins, Von Bell, Roman Harper could play a little bit more box safety, things like that. This over the last 4 years has been like at certain positions, like really struggling to find the silver lining, because it was like you're one injury away from just being absolutely screwed. To Bob's point, corner is one of those positions right now. We still have a whole offseason in the draft, but right now, not just corner, the entire defensive backfield is an injury away from being screwed. I'm going to give the D-line a pass just because we don't know. It's a new system, right? A lot of these guys were not drafted to play this system. I still think receiver is one of those positions where you are like one injury away from being really screwed. Running back's a little bit better than it has been in years past.
Is it? I mean, Alvin Kamara goes down, and what do you got?
Clyde and a guy who's probably going to go down, and Kendre Miller. I'm gonna hold out hope that that's better than it has been. I'm gonna hold out hope, unrealistic hope, but I mean that's my point. And the whole offensive line, like one starter goes down, and you're like, who's playing guard today? Who's playing tackle today? I don't know.
And we say that, and that's exactly what happened last year. Eric McCoy went down, and it was like a house of cards. Alvin Kamara got nicked up at the end of the year. We saw what happened. Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed both got hurt within a week of each other. And we didn't even get, Bub Means was starting to come along nicely, but he got hurt, at the same time. So you lost 3 receivers. You had to bring, Valdez Scantling in off the street, who, signed with the Seattle Seahawks, by the way, and rely on a guy you just picked up from waivers. So by the way, that's why I think receiver is going to be addressed in free agency and the midway point of the draft. I don't think early, but the midway point. But yeah, I mean, defensively, Marshawn Lattimore went down, then got traded. Paulson Adebo went down. You didn't have the versatile safeties to step in for an all of a sudden thin cornerback core. And the defensive line just played lousy. They didn't get hurt. They were just lousy. Exactly what if you put the Saints projected starting 22 offense, top 11 on offense, top 11 on defense. You look at that roster and you say, you know what, that can compete with a lot of teams. But that's not the way that's not the way professional football works, as you alluded to. You need depth. You run multi-receiver packages on offense. You run different packages on offense. You have to defend against different packages with different personnel packages on defense. So it's not the starting 11 on offense and the starting 11 on defense. You have sub packages, and the Saints don't have the quality personnel to fill out these sub packages.
They don't have quality personnel to, we'll just leave it at sub packages. That's fine. That's so. Yeah, I think regardless of what happens over the next couple days, the one thing that I would preach to you guys is remember, like, this is not a team that is a piece or two away. They are very far away. Are they in one of the worst positions in the league? I don't think so.
No.
So you can hang your hat on that, but they're also not in a great position either. They're kind of stuck in limbo. And to be frank, and I know Bob will agree with me on this, anytime you make a head coaching change, you're usually stuck in limbo because you just don't know. You don't know until you start seeing it on the field. So we will see how the Saints attack free agency the rest of the way. Bob, you've been busy.
Yeah.
You've been writing for a multitude of sites, covering free agency, covering the NCAA and the Pitt Panthers. And, it's a crazy time here in Charlotte, in Greensboro, with the ACC tournaments. The women's tournament just wrapped up, and the men's tournament is going on right now. So I know that you're busy with the NCAA, on top of the Saints, on top of everything else that you do. So the least people could do is, follow you, read your
please.
subscribe, maybe get your Cash App or your Venmo or your Zelle in the meantime as well. But in all seriousness, you do a lot of great work. It's been a transition period over the last couple months into a new site. So for the people that are, just waking up from their off-season slumber with the Saints and wanting to get back into it and read and get that information about what's going on with free agents and what's coming up in the draft processes, that missed that you're now at a new spot, where can people find you and your work?
Yeah, and that's just it. I understand that a lot of football fans, once your team is eliminated, whether it's early in the playoffs or if in the Saints case you don't make it to the playoffs, you kind of tune football out for a couple of months. But if you're a football fan, you got to come back now because free agency is a fun time. The draft and draft preparation is certainly a fun time. And that's when we are at our busiest. To Brendan's point, in the last, not today, but the previous 2 days alone, I wrote 16 different articles. John Hendricks, the editor over at Athlon Sports for Inside the Saints, the coverage of the New Orleans Saints. He's right there, with his number of pieces right there with me. So we're going crazy. So yeah, the least you guys can do is read them. And make sure we get paid so we can continue doing this for you. Sarcasm aside, follow Athlon Sports, where John Hendricks, myself, Brendan Boylan, and we're going to give you the best New Orleans Saints coverage that we can. And the three of us have worked together for many years now. So we're going to continue to do so. We were busy with coaching news. Now we're busy with free agency, but I do have draft profiles, basically written up in my handy dandy notebook, and ready to start plugging out. We've already put out a couple mini mock drafts, so check those out. Check us out on Athlon Sports. I also post my articles on my personal social media pages, Bob Rose on Facebook and at Bobby R 2613. I'll let Brendan tell you about the Bayou Blitz YouTube page and Bayou Blitz Twitter page, but make sure that you follow the Bayou Blitz Facebook page. And Brandon and I, as part of the Bayou Blitz, are very proud to continue to be part of promoting the Original Go Black and Gold charity fan cruise. We are only literally 2 weeks away, 2 weeks and 1 day to be precise, away from this year's cruise. But as far as I know, there are still tickets available. It's in its 11th year, and the proceeds for the Original Go Black and Gold charity fan cruise benefit the Get Checked or Check Out Foundation. get checked or check out. Helps improve lives by building community awareness with mental health and physical well-being, advocating for early diagnosis for cancer, diabetes, and heart-related ailments. Their mission is to focus on the total person, body, mind, and spirit, as well as to link families up with the resources they need in such trying and emotional times. And one of their annual fundraisers is the original Go Black and Gold Celebrity Charity Fan Cruise. This year's cruise is from March 27th through the 31st, sailing out of the port of New Orleans to Cozumel, and I assume we're going to come back. I haven't asked that question, but I assume. But it's a truly unique fan experience. It's going to provide an ultimate fan experience that includes beach Olympic events, a very intense putt-putt contest, as well as trivia, dining, and Q&A sessions with Saints greats that will be on this year's cruise: Delvin Breaux, Tyrone Hughes, Michael Lewis, Lance Moore, Courtney Roby, and Pierre Thomas. You can book the cruise through the Seven Seas Travel Agency, or you can contact Shireen DeWalt through the Go Black and Gold Charity Celebrity Fan Cruise Facebook page, either for tickets or for booking and even promotional information.
I'll go ahead and piggyback off of you and make sure that the ads get read. Today's show and the shows to come are brought to you in part by Blend of Hope Coffee Roasters.
Woohoo!
Coffee roast, yeah, how about that? Get some coffee coming our way sooner than later, as Bob takes a sip of not coffee, but that's okay. That's okay, because coffee is on the way. You can go over to Amazon now, officially this week. Look for the brand Blend of Hope Coffee Roasters. Get you a 12-ounce bag of organic Peru coffee. So again, thank you to Blend of Hope Coffee Roasters for starting the show, and go over to Amazon. Go to Blend of Hope Coffee Roasters and get you a 12-ounce bag of whole bean organic Peru coffee, freshly roasted coffee. That sounds good. Maybe not 10 o'clock at night, but first thing in the morning. For Bob, 10 o'clock at night, maybe. Bob's doesn't matter. Bob's like coffee.
Just like when I drank beer, yeah, it's like it's 5 o'clock somewhere, and y'all that follow our draft extravaganza, where Brendan and I are going to be with you throughout all 3 days of the draft, pretty much every minute of it. I'm going to be chugging my coffee, so I don't care what country it comes from, don't care what time of day or night it is, I'm going to be drinking it.
I'm going to say Blend of Hope might have to send us a different blend for each round of the draft.
That works.
Something like that. For myself, you can follow me virtually everywhere at BT Boylan. As Bob mentioned, I'm back writing. I came out of my little hiatus. I won't call it retirement, but a hiatus. I explored some different avenues, still exploring different avenues, but back writing. Going to be a lot of your fantasy football coverage that you guys were used to the last time I was writing. Diving into sports book a little bit as well. So hopefully we do better with that than we did with Bob and I's fantasy run. I know there's some people at home like rolling their eyes. I took your advice for all these weeks, and now you're coming back. I understand. I'm also going to do some editorial stuff and do some fun stuff. But super excited to be back working with John and Bob. It was one of those things when the call came in, you didn't have to think about it, right? It was a great free agency for me. It was one call, that's all, and it was a pretty quick process. Love working with these guys. For the Bayou Blitz, you can follow us over on Twitter at Bayou Blitz Pod. You can also follow us on YouTube at Bayou Blitz Pod. Remember, we've teased it. The draft is indeed coming up, which means Bob and I are going to have some exclusive stuff that is just posted to our YouTube. Now, you might be saying, well, it's not really exclusive. YouTube's up for anybody. Yeah, but if you don't subscribe and you don't put notifications on, how are you going to know when we have the new profile or when we preview a certain position and those type of things? So go ahead, go over there, click on that. Also, go ahead and subscribe to Spotify, Apple Pod, wherever you get your pods, to make sure you're keeping up with the latest. We're also going to post some exclusive stuff there throughout the draft coverage. I can't believe we're this close to the draft. We are getting close. It's going to be a whole lot of fun. Well, guys, thanks so much for tuning in to another edition of the Bayou Blitz podcast, a Wednesday on a Wednesday. Doesn't happen too often, but we made it. We did it. Sean said, gotta love the offseason so far for the Saints. Sean, you might be the first person that I've heard actually say that. Because the Saints fans are so damn negative all the time. So thank you, Sean. Way to close the show on a positive note.
I love it.
Guys, for my co-host Bob Rose, I'm Brendan Boylan. Thanks so much for tuning in. Until next week, find some peace, spread love, practice positivity, and be patient, damn it. Be patient with the Saints. We'll see you next week. Who dat?
Good night.